Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and I'm joined here today by Mr. Hermann Pretorius. Hermann, how are you?
I'm there in spirit, even though I'm not visibly there because of reasons. I am glad to be here, even if it is just to listen to the melodious tones of that introduction. I mean, that was like Barry White level smoothness.
Wow.
Okay.
Pretorius Silver-Tongued Cavalier strikes again, eh?
Yes. My strategy is very much to hit on my male colleagues and then hope someone falls in love with me. It's a risky move. I'm not seeing if it works.
Well, occasionally we do see you getting attention in the comments, so
Yeah, if you're
your fan base will be missing you.
You should probably check this with your girlfriend, Herman, because I'm not sure she's going to feel the same way. Anyway, right. I don't know why your camera is off, because you didn't actually tell me before the show, but I assume it's a good reason. And of course, we're also joined today by Mr. Terence Corrigan.
Hi, look, I can't match what Hermann just said, so hi.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of us can. Right. Let us get stuck into it. And this is actually a story, I think, from last week. But it was so, I don't know what the right word to use for it is. Spectacular? No, that doesn't feel right. Completely insane, I think might be more appropriate. But Police Minister Bheki Cele, he of silly hat wearing, was along with the National Police Commissioner General Sithole, and they were before Parliament's Police Portfolio Committee, where they were talking about a range of issues. From the slashing of the police budget to the problems with the command structure, and responding to questions by an ANC MP about potential investors being scared away from the country because of high crime levels. Cele said that the statistics had been used globally as a, quote, economic blockade to persuade tourists to favor certain countries at the expense of others. He said, quote, it is used as propaganda, especially when it comes to tourism and investment. Yes, as Moonchild says in the comments, he's an asshat, which is something that Big Daddy Liberty always calls Bheki Cele. I think that's probably correct. Cele then went on a sort of bizarre rant about Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He said they talk about beautiful women, beautiful beaches, all that kind of stuff, but you're not allowed to take pictures of the favelas because the police have made deals with the drug lords. And in South Africa, you don't have any situation where there's an agreement between the police and the drug lords. I'm not sure about that. He then said that there needed to be a re-examination of SA's ranking as the third most dangerous country in the world, and that there needed to be just generally further debate on this. He then said that we had pulled off the 2010 FIFA World Cup without serious incidents, and that there was no butchering of teams, tourists, and visitors, which is what he said other people were saying about South Africa. He then went on to say that he had been told by a taxi driver that the suburb of Brixton in London was suicidal to go to because of the high level of crime. Right. So, Terence, your thoughts on the police minister's view of crime in South Africa?
Well, I think the hat is the least ridiculous thing about him. In fact, I really like his hats. I don't know where to start. I really don't. I'm uncomfortably left gobsmacked by what we talk about in the show. I was also told, that going to the suburb of Kreuzberg in Berlin was dangerous. And when I got out, I saw this sort of Melville-esque environment, just with higher buildings, more population density, and less danger. What Cele is doing fundamentally is what P.W. Botha did back in the 1980s. That we got a couple of problems, but they're not as bad as everyone thinks. If people would just listen to us, they would understand everything would be fine. No, actually not. You you have problems. An economic blockade. Seriously, he's spending too much time with the Friends of Cuba Society. I think it's the word that gets stuck in your head. No, man, come on. South Africa actually doesn't do too badly in getting tourists, and when we don't have plagues rampaging through the country. We do, however, have a bit of a reputation because you just see 2 or 3 of those visits to go wrong, which unfortunately they do. For someone to get raped or murdered, and that sets you back. I remember when who was the Anglo-Zulu War tour guide, Rafferty, I think,
David Rattray.
David Rattray, yeah. Yes. I mean that set the cat among the pigeons around the world. Lots of people coming to South Africa for historical reasons. Your well-heeled Canadian or British tourist coming to see the Boer War battlefields. I mean that was a message like directly to them. It would be, I think, infinitely preferable if we could stop looking for the Oliver Stone style conspiracy buried in the reporting of our crime stats, and maybe do something about the actual crime. Now he says the World Cup. Well, yeah, that was the one time we were colonized by the Swiss and got told to do things properly, and by the government's own statistics, murder went down and everything because you had lots of visible policing. It's incidentally a very strong argument against the Firearm Control Act, this amendment bill, as we've said. No, I mean, I said I was gobsmacked, but unfortunately, the level of insanity that courses through our politics, actually, maybe I'm not as surprised as I should be. I mean, we had a foreign minister with a hole in her head, and we had another guy who ended up taking pics of himself, and they ended up in Pornhub. Seriously, this is the quality of our of governance. Really?
Yes, and of course, it's not like these are backbench MPs. These are ministers.
these are guys who wear hats.
Yeah.
Hermann, back in the 80s, Botha used to wear a hat to show he was the president.
Yeah, no, exactly. Hermann, you said to me this morning that when I showed you the story, it ruined your day. Could you just
yes, I mean, I could just feel the hope sapping out of me a bit, because as Bheki Cele so often does to us in the country. But what I think is astounding here is that you've got a minister in one of the worst crime-affected countries in the world, the minister literally responsible for cutting that crime rate, questioning whether that crime rate is actually as bad as it is, mere weeks after the mass destruction of poverty, the murder of a few hundred people, in the glare of the public eye across the world. And then this moron comes to Parliament, barely strings a sentence together, trying to explain why nameless third force figures across the world are conspiring against South Africa. I mean, we're still not clear why, but it reminds me of Bladen Zemande and other, lunatic communists who've often said that, the investment strike must end. Yeah, these selfish tourists and investors that want to come to South Africa and not lose their money and lives. I mean, that's very, very, very selfish of them, and they should drop this agenda against the black child or whatever at once. But it's just awful. Imagine you're in a country with massive flooding, and your minister responsible for flooding says, the flooding is just really being exaggerated. It just baffles that the person responsible for getting crime under control in a country where, ironically, if we're going to use the race nationalist tribal definitions of the ANC, black people suffer most under this crime that is apparently so made up by nameless forces for a pointless agenda. I mean, it really, more than anything, it didn't make me angry. It just sapped the hope right out of me. But then, I mean, I remember that there are some things worth fighting for, so we don't have to be completely negative. But it really is astounding that a man can, produce such fecal matter from both ends of his body.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's a reminder that Ramaphosa is really not serious about governing. There are many holes in the what's it called, the Ramaphoria New Dawn narrative, but the presence of idiots like Bheki Cele in cabinet is, I think, a very, very big gaping hole in the theory that Ramaphosa is serious about running the country properly. Terence, any final thoughts?
Times like this that I really think everyone should watch the extended edition of The Lord of the Rings and just calm down. There are things worth fighting for, and then come back to reality and shake your head. I don't know. I mean, is something actionable placed on this that we shouldn't be releasing statistics? Because I remember they tried that during Bheki's tenure.
Yeah. And in fact, they're still very cagey about getting crime statistics out of people. If you go to your local community police forum and you try to get a hold of the crime statistics, you might get them for your area, but there's going to be a lot of caginess.
But I think it also there is a silver lining to this particular cloud of methane gas, is the fact that it shows how out of touch the government and the ANC really have become. If you can live in South Africa, if you were just an ordinary South African citizen, you wouldn't for a moment think about dismissing the severity of crime. It just shows that this man really is in a bizarre, isolated, made-up world of Cuban conspiracy theories and stupid hats. And it just shows that there really is an opportunity here to exploit the fact that this government represents less than 30% of the electoral support of the people of South Africa. There really is an opportunity here to exploit these weaknesses because they are so obvious and so painful. So if South Africans want to, if I get past my, just sighing the hope out of my life phase that Bheki Cele so often puts me in, it really becomes a matter of a right. This person is so disconnected, and yet people have stopped engaging politically. People have stopped trying to make a difference. And it's because of that political apathy that morons like this man can be the minister in charge of policing in this country. And the way to fix it is, yes, let's roll our eyes for a bit, let's bitch and moan for a while. But then beyond that point, we need to stop bitching about a better life and actually build one, vote for one, campaign for one, put forward ideas for one, so that these idiots can be relegated to the historical abyss of irrelevance and puerileness that awaits them.
Indeed. And you can do your bit by liking and subscribing to the video, or leaving us a good review on the podcast platform you're listening to us to. So let's move along.
Nick, that's a unique way of trying to monetize my bitching. I like it.
That's what I'm here for. Right. So we are now going to move on to a story that on its surface looks pretty good. And it could turn out to be good, but we have some doubts as to how good it could be. So there was a story in the Sunday Times this weekend that the ANC is kind of giving up on their attempts to negotiate with the EFF in terms of getting through an amendment on the Constitution, which would weaken property rights fundamentally. The minister leading the ANC's delegation in negotiating with the EFF is Justice Minister Ronald Lamola. And he said that his party will go it alone now, as it will not support the destructive Zimbabwean route entailed in the EFF's demand that all land be put in the custodianship of the state in return for supporting the ANC's constitutional amendment bid. Now, the ANC's proposal is not that custodianship is a bad idea, but just rather than saying that all land must be in custodianship, just certain land must be in custodianship. And then that's nice and vague, and they can do whatever they want with that. The EFF has said that it won't support the constitutional amendment bill before Parliament unless the custodianship clause is put in the way they want. Lamola said some stuff that I think was pretty good. He said that custodianship amounted to nationalization of all land, something that would completely reorganize and disorganize land ownership. That is where we are differing, he said. They want us to take all the land and put it under the custodian of the state. We asked them, what is this? What does it mean? How are you going to do it, to take all the land and put it under the custodianship of the state? They said they're simply repossessing the land. That is what it means. But in reality, in actual practice, it is nationalization of the land when you look at it practically. That is what it means. They would not only disorganize forms of land ownership, they would disorganize the social structure of our country and the whole economy for that matter. I think the Zimbabwe situation is a good example of what it would do to the economy. Lamola further described the EFF's proposal of state custodianship as, quote, anti-black. And he went on to say, the people are not fighting for land to go to the state. They are fighting for land to come to them. That is the ANC position. We are saying once we expropriate the land, we must give it to the people. Now, there was a little bit of pushback against this by a different ANC MP, who I believe is the chairperson of the committee, Matole Matseka, who said that there really wasn't that big a difference between the EFF and the ANC positions, and they were coming to an agreement. Let me start with you, Terence. How seriously should we take this? Does this mean that the amendment is dead, in which case we have much cause to celebrate?
No, not dead. I think that anything that that highlights the dangers and that seems to produce some sort of recognition of those dangers is positive. But this, on a scale of bizarreness, I think does register right alongside Minister Cele's objection to our statistics. It is official policy of the government at present that black people, or more accurately, black people who receive land through redistribution programs, should not own their land. I mean, that they went to court to fight David Rugase becoming an owner. When Parliament debated the issue, the proposal to appoint this committee to amend Section 25, Gugile and Quinty said very clearly that title deeds were not on the table. So the idea that they are going to be passing ownership on it, while welcome, I mean, I'd need to see more details. I suspect that what many people in the ANC realize is that the custodianship idea, or the idea that you're going to be forever a tenant of the state, is actually not very appealing to most of its own supporters. And I've been in a couple of online committee meetings, from provincial legislatures, where you find ANC MPs actually, or ANC representatives are saying this. What about ownership? People asking me about owning this stuff, and I don't know if they fully understand that it's their parties against it, but the point is nonetheless made. I think that the big issue between the ANC and the EFF is who's going to take credit for whatever goes through. And I think the EFF has positioned itself in such a way that it never has to take responsibility for anything, but can claim kudos, for having the most radical, outlandish idea. That then I think is fundamentally why they can't get an agreement. But remember, the custodianship could be sailed through under the ANC's proposal. It could even go through, I think, under the situation, under the set of circumstances we have at the moment. It's just that at the moment you might have some sort of constitutional recourse. And I think even with the ANC's with the ANC's proposal, they would still have an enormous berth to get around a constitutional objection. We shall see, but I would caution against seeing this is all done and dusted.
Yeah, I must say, those comments from the Justice Minister are pretty good on the land issue. If only they reflected anything his party has actually been doing in government.
Yeah.
And I think it really shows that the shakiness of many of the ANC's positions on property, that they have to retreat so viciously from them, in at least their rhetoric, even if they continue to push for nationalization in all but name. Hermann, what do you think?
Well, I think there are a few points worth making. The first point is that while I broadly appreciate what Lamola is saying, and And while one has to acknowledge that he is one of the more competent ministers, or at least one of the ministers with some understanding or some ideological conviction, some intelligence, and even some, vision as to what can work, what can't. The problem is, I mean, that's really like being the best coloring in preschool. It's not a great brag. The standards were low to begin with, but he makes this point that people are fighting for land ownership, not for the state to own land. But that's just simply not true. There is no fight going on for land ownership. The ANC's data itself, no matter what Piet Kroukamp wants to think, beyond the confines of his bandana, there is no hunger out there for land. No data, no set of data supports this conclusion. Not the process of land claims, where upwards of 97% of successful claimants chose monetary compensation rather than ownership of the land over which the claim was successful. The ANC's internal polling heading into the 2019 election does not support land hunger as a massive pressing issue. The IRR's own data doesn't show this. So there is this idea that people are fighting for land it is just a vacuous mythological narrative on which to base some form of ideological push. So that's the first thing that we must acknowledge here, is that Lamola is saying some right things, but he's also saying some fundamentally nonsense things. But then beyond that, if we look procedurally, if the ANC were interested in, as it were, abandoning this process, because he says they will push through, but they can't push through without the EFF. They can't get the 2/3 majority in the National Assembly to amend the Constitution. So the only way the work of the ad hoc committee can end when submissions finally close on the 13th of August would be either the fulfillment of the committee's mandate in delivering a report to the Speaker of Parliament saying we recommend this and this and this as legislative steps to alter the Constitution, or a resolution passed in the National Assembly that revokes the mandate given by the National Assembly to the ad hoc committee to investigate this. So this thing can't just die. It can't just peter out and the ANC can sort of let it die and people should breathe a sigh of relief, a breath of relief because, this process is now stuttering to its death. No, it has to culminate in either a resolution going through Parliament suspending the mandate of the committee. That won't happen. Or it will culminate in the committee giving a report to the Speaker saying this the Constitution should not be amended. That's not going to happen either. If one thinks that there is some skill in cabinet, it might be close to Ronald Lamola's seat in cabinet. And the fear here, or the real risk that could be afoot here, is that we now are 2 weeks away from the final deadline of public submissions to oppose the draft legislation, the draft 18th Constitutional Amendment Bill that would make expropriation without compensation constitutional along the lines of the ANC-EFF policy. This could, if we're going to think that, the chess over several dimensions is being played here, it could just be an effort by Ronald Lamola to discourage people to oppose this vigorously, to, as it were, promise to take the sting out of this bee before it actually comes around with a couple of its friends and it's just, stabs you into anaphylactic shock. But the broader point here is there's no way for this thing to just die. The procedure of the Constitution or Parliament does not allow it. So let's not be lulled into whatever sense of security these remarks might give us. They do not reflect ANC policy. They do not reflect government policy. They do not reflect the reality that this thing can be abandoned in any procedural way before Parliament. So it's welcoming. It's something to be welcomed. It's interesting. There's some real sensible stuff there, but it doesn't change any of the fundamentals. That the threat to property rights remains, and it is one that if it is not dealt with decisively and defeated and extended beyond, the scope of what politicians can get their grubby little hands on, will take us down the Zimbabwe route, whether Minister Lamola wants that or not.
Right. Let us move on to our last story for today, and this is one from the US. And it comes from an article written by Barry Weiss, who was formerly a writer at the New York Times before she had a falling out with her colleagues there over her support for Israel. And as a result, she was kind of pushed out by the newspaper. So she's written an interesting article about, I guess, cancel culture is the common term for it, but I don't know. I don't know if I like that term that much. But anyway, so she talks about a person called Maud Maron, who is a public defense lawyer in the United States. She basically defends people who are accused of crimes and can't afford lawyers. She's got really strong, bona fide left-wing credentials. She's worked with this public defense group for ages. She was a clinic escort for Planned Parenthood, the abortion provider in the United States. She studied under a Black Panther professor in American universities and was described as an excellent research assistant. So, she's a person very much of the left. Recently, she wrote an op-ed, and it began as thusly: I am a mom, a public defender, an elected public school council member, and a city council candidate. But at the Department of Education anti-bias training, I was instructed to refer to myself as a white woman, as if my whole life reduces to my race. Those who oppose this ideology are shunned and humiliated, even if it does nothing to actually improve our broken schools. So this is what she wrote. She then went on to blame Department of Education budget cuts for American school problems. This caused a big backlash in the US. She was accused of being a racist by the Black Attorneys of Legal Aid Caucus. They said that this organization said that she had no business in having a career in public defense. They're ashamed she works for the Legal Aid Society in New York, that she's racist and openly so, and that she's a classic example of what 21st century racism looks like. She was subsequently pushed out of her job at the Legal Aid Society and is now suing them for discrimination against her based on her race. Terence, what do you make of this?
Well, this is a kind of thing that I wonder whether you would have seen 20 years ago. By all accounts, she is very much a person of the left. She apparently was an accompanier at Planned Parenthood, one of those people who takes people in who are going to go get abortions so that they don't feel uncomfortable with protesters and stuff. Her focus here seemed to be that she disagreed with the prevailing orthodoxy because it was not going to have a rational relationship to the outcome that she and I suppose many other people in her position sought, which was the improvement of education. I think it demonstrates the kind of stultifying, destructive influence of racial ideological absolutism. And it's interesting that you've seen conservative commentators from the right of America referring to her as, possibly the bravest person in the United States at the moment. And this, comes back to the chat we had a couple of days ago about Turning Point USA getting upset about having invited an adult actress to one of their. It's the same thing. People do not neatly fit into boxes, and I'm quite heartened that you do see these sort of voices appearing on the left of the spectrum, because I think that let's say sensible lefties have as much to lose from this as anyone else, and I think we probably have, we as liberals have more in common with them than we do with some of the absolutists that might hold closer than we do to some of the other issues. That would be my thoughts.
Hermann, in 30 seconds or so, your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I do think that the most discouraging thing from that whole piece was the fact that there were several quotes in that piece where people came to Moran or Maud's defense, but didn't want to do so publicly because the mob would come for them. And I just think, I mean, it's a well-worn piece of poetry, especially in our circles. But the Martin Niemöller poem of Germany, circa 1940, does come to mind. At first, they came for the X, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't X, and then they came for the Y, and they didn't speak up. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak up for me. So it really does test the bounds of the basic assumptions of liberalism that I think has been in place for roughly 200 years. We are now really at a weird inflection point where the people who are blatant racists now call other people racist. It is rather shocking, and all credit to this woman for not taking this lying down, for stepping up to fight. And I hope within the foreseeable future the IRR, or the Freedom Advocacy Network, can establish similar sort of infrastructure for people who might feel the same monster coming after them, and then have the support, have the infrastructure to say, bugger you, we're not going to be called racist by a bunch of racists simply because we hold to the idea that you should be judged by the content of your character, not the color of your skin.
Right. And of course, we wish the people fighting this totalitarian approach in the US well, because of course, what goes on over there often affects our intellectual climate over here. So these things do matter. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Please support the Institute of Race Relations and the Daily Friend. And we'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the show. Cheers, everyone.